Hi everyone, I'm Shelley and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another Question the Narrative video, and today's topic is subterranean creatures. Are they us? I did another video on dwellers of the underground a few years ago, and I thought that it was time to revisit it just because I am extremely interested in folklore, and it's something that I started thinking about today as I was reading just something in a Steve Quayle book about goblins. But before we get to that, let's think about these underground creatures, because it isn't something that you just hear about in folklore from hundreds of years ago or from primitive tribes. This is something that you still hear to this day. There are stories now of underground creatures living in the tunnels under Washington, D.C. And there are stories of other underground creatures, maybe teachers too, who knows? They have to have teachers, right? But anyway, living in these underground places that we often think to ourselves, where could they possibly come from? And some theories have been, some people think that they're aliens. Some people think that they are from outside of this pond, so to speak. Other people believe that they were possibly the original inhabitants of the earth. Something that I recently hypothesized was that some of these creatures may actually be from another realm, from a different, we'll just call it plane of existence. I don't like that term because it sounds very new agey, but we know that there is this realm that we live on now, and then there is, at the very least, the heavenly realm. So we know that there is more than one. There's a spiritual realm. And so I was just wondering if possibly some of these beings, like fairies and elves and gnomes and other things that we call cryptids, if they may possibly be able to move between the realms. But today, as I was reading about goblins, I had another idea. I started wondering to myself, could at least some of these underground creatures be us? I got this notion from reading in that book, and if you're interested, it's Little Creatures by Steve Quayle. He mentioned how in the original book, The Princess and the Goblin, that goblins were thought to have once been men who retreated underground. And so I found this article here, and I'm just going to read this first paragraph right here to you. MacDonald, that's the author of The Princess and the Goblin, begins The Princess and the Goblin by introducing a subterranean world inhabited by fearsome goblins. According to legend, this strange race may once have been men. However, they were long driven below ground by severe taxes or stricter laws or something. Although the goblins are now no longer men, they were once so, and achieved their present terrible state due to some unspecified persecution. The narrator also reminds his reader that despite appearances, these goblins may not be as inhumane as they look. They had enough of affection left for each other to preserve them from being absolutely cruel for cruelty's sake to those that came in their way. But still they so heartily cherished the ancestral grudge against those who occupied their former possessions, and especially against the descendants of the king who had caused their expulsion. This last brief introduction to the goblins hardly inspires enough sympathy in the reader for us to side with these sad, horrible creatures. Our sympathies obviously lie with the inhabitants above ground and the Princess Irene, despite the fact that perhaps these goblins would not be hatching their dastardly plots if Irene's ancestors had not driven them below ground in the first place. Indeed, although we only meet Irene's King Papa briefly, it is difficult to imagine this heroic figure astride his white steed having any dealings with the goblins. So you might be thinking, okay, well, this is a children's storybook. Yes, it is. But as I always say about fairy tales and other folk tales, everything has a morsel of truth in it. And there are legends, and sometimes there are actual factual accounts of people deciding to live underground. And we're going to go through some of them today. Now, some of them are a little fanciful and are more on the folkloric side of the, I guess, of the divide, but then there are others that are just factual stories of people who live underground. And again, just as with this one, I've talked about this in another video, the Moon-Eyed People of Appalachia. Appalachia. I know someone's going to tell me that I said that wrong. People like to correct my pronunciation. But anyway, I believe there is a morsel of truth to this. So we're going to first read about the mysterious Moon-Eyed People of Appalachia. Oh, let's see. It is midnight, the moon is dim, and hundreds of diminutive people, bearded, flat-faced, and pale, with large blue eyes, are hard at work atop Fort Mountain in northern Georgia. They're building a zigzagging wall of rocks from east to west. The wall is only a few feet tall, but they hope it will protect them from the Cherokee, so much taller and stronger than themselves. All across Appalachia, there are tales of bands of these strange people, living in the region's many caves and coming out only at night because daylight was too strong for their weak eyes. They come near a house at night, and the people inside hear them talking, but they must not go out, and in the morning they find their corn gathered, or the field cleared as if a whole force of men had been at work, wrote Lynn Losia, Cherokee, author of The Secrets and Mysteries of the Cherokee Little People. Always remember, do not watch. So first of all, let's look at some traits of these little people, these Moon-Eyed People. First of all, they're said to have very large eyes. Well, if you think about it, if someone is living underground, over time, depending on how many generations these people have been living underground, they may start to develop larger eyes. I'm not talking about macroevolution. I don't believe in that. I am talking about adaptation, which is real. And would it be possible that over time they would start developing larger eyes so as to be able to take in more light because it is so dark under the ground? There's also the fact that they're very small. They're called diminutive. And now they're not always called small in all of the stories, but in many of them they are called diminutive or small. And could that be from lack of sunlight, from a lack of vitamin D, because it does make you weak-boned? And over time, again, would it cause people to start becoming shorter in stature? And obviously, it says they're pale. Well, yeah, that would come with the territory of not ever being out in the sunlight, and the fact that they can't really go out in the sunlight because it's too much for their eyes. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever been in the dark for an extended period of time, even if it's just overnight, if you're in a really dark room and someone walks in and just flips the light on, it hurts your eyes, especially, and it says they have blue eyes. I have blue eyes, and my eyes are very sensitive to the light too. I don't know. I've read somewhere that it is like that for people with blue eyes, that it's harder for us to deal with light than it is for those with darker eyes. I don't know. If you have the same issue and have brown eyes, you can let me know. But so far, all of these things would certainly seem to fit with a population of people who are living underground. So let's continue. For centuries, stories of these moon-eyed people have captivated and creeped out locals and visitors alike in Appalachia. According to some legends, they were present before the Cherokee came to the area and driven out in a battle at Fort Mountain, waged by the Cherokee when the full moon was too bright for their opponents' sensitive eyes. We are asked every day about the legend, says Emmanuel Stewart, park manager at Fort Mountain State Park. It's one reason why many people visit. According to rangers, archaeologists estimate the wall at Fort Mountain was built between 500 and 1500, but no one knows who actually constructed it. For believers, what's left of the mysterious wall is proof that the Moon-Eyed People did indeed exist. 60 miles away at the Cherokee County Historical Museum, another object has been cited as evidence of their existence. The curious 3-foot-tall tail and soapstone statue was discovered by a farmer named Felix Ashley in the 1840s and features 2 entwined figures with oval heads and large crescent-shaped eyes. Now, I know that there are people on there who are saying, well, that sounds a lot like aliens. But from the picture that I showed you earlier, I think that this is also consistent with some sort of at least humanoid or possibly formerly human person who spent generations and generations and generations underground and started developing characteristics from living in that sort of environment. And I know this is all speculation, but that's what Question the Narrative is about, is asking the questions. So that's what I'm doing. In 1882, an article in the Native American newspaper Cherokee Phoenix detailed the discovery of 3 burying grounds of extremely small-statured people. The longest skeleton was a mere 19 inches, near the Tennessee town of Sparta. Some of the individuals appeared to have adult teeth that were worn down with age. Several of the bodies, interred in stone coffins, were buried with items that may have been made from shells. And I will leave a link in the description box to the rest of this. Actually, sorry, I just don't want to read the entire one because I have so many that I want to share with you. Here it just says that white colonists were fascinated by the legend and speculated about who the Moon-eyed people could have been. Some believed they were possibly descendants of a fabled community of albino people who were said to have lived in what is now Panama. I think it's funny to hear these stories about albino people because that they seem to creep up everywhere in folk tales. I grew up on a street in Pennsylvania that was infamous for that. They always said that there were albinos who lived down there who were crazy. And I'm nothing against people who are actually albinos. I'm just telling you what the legend was for the street that I lived on. And people were actually afraid to come down my street. And I lived down there my whole life and never saw anything. But I would actually have people ask me if I was an albino once they heard that I lived on the street. And I was always like, do I look like an albino? I have red hair and freckles. So anyway, it's just funny how some of these same threads seem to go through these stories. Anyway, it says others adhered to the idea that the Moon-eyed were actually descendants of the mythical 12th century Welsh prince Madoc ab Owain Gwynedd, who allegedly landed in the Americas near what's now Mobile, Alabama. So, again, I will leave a link in the description box for this one right here. But, even considering the remains that they found that they said were 19 inches long, it makes you wonder, some of these stories that we do hear about fairies and elves and gnomes, could they be related to actual humans who just over time ended up living underground and for some reason just adapted and stayed there? This is from the movie Chud. And yeah, I grew up watching this movie. My parents let me watch pretty much whatever I wanted. And my children have never seen this, but it's called Chud. And Chud, it was an acronym for Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dweller. And it was about homeless people who were living in like the sewer system under New York and had become these mutants. Now they came across some like toxic substance because 80s movies, but just the sheer fact of the eyes adapting to be able to see in the darkness and everything, it just, yeah, this whole idea of people living underground made me think of that. And continuing on with the more folkloric aspect of this is something that I just learned about today. It says a living nightmare lurks in Toronto's underground waterways, waiting. And this one says, in 1979, a man saw a living nightmare while venturing down a tunnel. The origins of this urban legend come from a 1979 article in the Toronto newspaper, The Sunday Sun. The article, titled Tunnel Monster of Cabbagetown, evokes some pretty interesting imagery. The article purports that a Toronto resident of the Cabbagetown district named Ernest was searching for a missing kitten when he came across a tunnel near his apartment building. He encountered a monster roughly 10 feet in and was so shocked and frightened by it that he fled. The article notes that he saw a living nightmare he'll never forget. The creature was so unbelievable to Ernest that he barely told anyone about it. He said to the reporter, "If I tell you what I saw, people will think I was drunk or crazy. They'll never believe me." Ernest, the first and only person to see the tunnel monster, describes it as somewhat monkey-like with orange slanted eyes. It was pitch black in there. I saw it with my flashlight. The eyes were orange and red, slanted. It was long and thin, almost like a monkey, 3 feet long, large teeth, weighing maybe 30 pounds with slate gray fur. Now, I'm going to admit, this one does not sound quite so much like this would be a descendant of a population of people that went to live underground. But I wanted to read this, although the next part, I don't know. But even more than how the creature looked, Ernest was spooked most by the fact that it spoke to him. Specifically, it warned him against going any further. It said, go away, in a hissing voice, that it took off down a long tunnel off to the side. I got out of there as fast as I could. I was shaking with fear. So whatever this was speaking to him. I am not even going to try to, decide or to make an assumption about what this thing was. But it was able to speak. And then again, this is just according to this eyewitness account. We don't know what actually happened. But just the idea that there are these things that are living underground that defy explanation. And so it's interesting to me to kind of speculate what these things could possibly be. Here we have the Metro Monster of Washington, D.C. It's a secondhand account revolving around a subterranean cryptid living in the Washington, D.C. metro system. Let me see. I'll just skip down to here. I was riding the metro home very late one night after returning from a trip to Philly. It was a Sunday around 11 p.m., so I think I might have caught one of the last trains of the evening. The conductor seemed to confirm this as he sat casually with his little operator door open. I had ridden in the first car of a train before, but I'd never seen one of the conductors operating it, so I sat nearby. We were the only 2 people in this train car. I'm not really one to strike up conversations with strangers, but this man clearly was. While speeding us through the red line, he looked over his shoulder and said, "It's nights like these, am I right?" Very silly way to start a conversation, but I humored him with a nod. He starts rambling his way through random anecdotes of the job, his family, his weekend. The conductor was a talker. I was only half listening when he mentioned something about a monster living in the metro. I, like I'm sure many of you would, immediately perked up and started asking questions. "You're saying there's a monster in the metro?" "Sure is, I've seen it myself." The way he looked at me, you'd have thought he was the world's foremost expert on this creature. "What do you call it?" He shrugged. "I don't know, it's just the monster. The Metro Monster." Not exactly the most inventive name, but it got to the point, and I liked the alliteration. "How many others have seen it?" "Oh, just me and my buddy. He works the red line, too." Huh, I thought. Not exactly the large network of witnesses I had been imagining or hoping for. It was clear to me that this thing was in the early stages of attaining urban legend status. I proceeded to garner as much information as I could from the conductor. He told me he would see it from the front windows of his train car late at night when the metro has just about closed. He would catch glimpses of it by the lights from the train car illuminating the tunnel. They would speed on by and the creature would quickly slink off to the side, flattening itself against the wall of tunnel while the train passed. When I asked what it looked like, the conductor had some trouble describing it. He told me it looks a bit like a tree, lots of spindly protrusions that aren't exactly limbs. It also has a distinct central trunk that these branches snake out from. However, the creature is pale white with almost human-like skin. So I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to say, is it possible that these whole idea of the branches coming out of the trunk and the spindly protrusions, could that just be, a trick of the light? But what catches my eye is that this creature is also pale white, which is, which fits with something living underground, and it has almost human-like skin. The conductor couldn't say much beyond that, though he insisted that it wasn't just a collection of stray wires. I was skeptical, but he said he'd seen it enough times to know it was alive and too large to be wires hanging in the tunnels. When the train lights caught sight of the monster, he could see it twist. He could see it look towards the oncoming train. He could see the red flash of what might have been eyes. So, and that, I don't know if that's supposed to be a depiction of it. No, I don't. Well, Yeah. I think those are just illustrations of other things. But that's just another story of something that lives underground. And this is another modern day story. You know, this was written 4 years ago. Next, we'll talk about the Hopi Ant People. And I've talked about them a few times in different videos, so I'm just going to make a mention of them now again. In Hopi mythology, the Ant People are believed to be in ancient and advanced civilizations that once coexisted with the Hopi tribe during a time of great turmoil. As the story goes, the Hopi people faced impending cataclysmic events such as droughts, famine, and other natural disasters that threatened their very existence. In their time of need, the Ant People extended a helping hand to the Hopi. Legend has it that the Ant People guided the tribe to underground sanctuaries, providing shelter and sustenance until the surface world became habitable once again. This assistance from the Ant People is said to have saved the Hopi from extinction, instilling a profound sense of gratitude and reverence for these mysterious beings. And the Ant People were called such. I'm surprised I don't really see any pictures here. The Ant People were called Ant People because they had large eyes, like ants, which again would be consistent with a population living underground. And again, you have to wonder, were they once people that lived above ground? Next, we have the Lizard People. They spelled people wrong in this newspaper article. But anyway, and I talked about the Lizard People of Los Angeles a while back, so we'll just touch on it here. On January 29th, 1934, the Los Angeles Times featured a cover story on a mining engineer named G. Warren Shufelt. He claimed to have developed a radio X-ray that showed a series of underground tunnels beneath Los Angeles, which he mapped out. He also believed that there was gold there. Legends of Spanish gold buried treasure somewhere under Fort Moore Hill dated back to the 19th century. However, things got weirder, as the Los Angeles Times headline suggested. The headline read, "Lizard People's Catacomb City Hunted." Shufelt claimed that once he had mapped the tunnels, he was taken to a Hopi Indian, so we have here another Hopi legend here, named Little Chief Greenleaf, who told him about the Lizard People. So before we had the Ant People, now we have the Lizard People, both associated with the Hopi Indians. Could they all be connected, as they all lived underground? Greenleaf said they had built 3 underground cities along the west coast 5,000 years ago, after a great fire had engulfed the American Southwest. Yep, one of those great fires that we hear about all the time. The Lizard People were not lizards, as we think of them as reptilians from the show V or David Icke. They were a highly advanced race of humans, more intelligent than modern humans, that considered the lizard a symbol of life. They built their subterranean cities in the shape of a lizard. The head of the lizard was under what is now Dodger Stadium, and the tail was under the downtown Central Library. He even said that the tunnels extended to the ocean. So again, we have yet another story of, and this one is pretty contemporary. You know, it was almost 100 years ago, but not like thousands of years ago, of a group of people who were said to live in tunnels under Los Angeles. And here are just a couple of photos of Derinkuyu in Turkey with these massive underground tunnels. Now, this is just a depiction. I don't think that this is, I don't think it was mapped out in a detailed way. I think this is just artist rendering, maybe what they imagined that it looked like. But it's not unheard of that there were people who lived underground long enough to do something like this. So it wouldn't be unheard of to think that there were people who were living down there for a very, very long period of time. And if they lived down there long enough, if they decided to stay there, would their bodies have begun to adapt? Or if not to adapt, at least to have been affected, possibly negatively. You're thinking about the smaller stature, the pale skin, because of the lack of sunlight. And also, I'm even wondering possibly from the lack of oxygen, because it certainly seems like there would be less oxygen to breathe down in the underground tunnels. So, you know, would that affect their size as well? So then you just have to wonder to yourself, okay, but realistically speaking, have any human societies ever lived underground? And so I found this article, and that's exactly what it's called. And it says it's not just an ancient phenomenon. So to me, that means yes. And it says, from ancient catacombs to modern subways, humans have always traveled underground for brief amounts of time. But have entire societies of people ever lived underground? Yes, but historically only during emergencies and when they have had no other option. So you think about the people who were taken underground by the ant people. However, those ant people were obviously used to living underground and had been there longer. In recent decades, however, that has begun to change. And it says, the thing that is important to know about the underground is that we do not belong there. Biologically, physiologically, our bodies are just not designed for life underground, which again fits with the idea that the people would begin to change over time once they were there for a long extended period of time. And I'm talking generations. I'm not just talking a couple of years, although it would certainly seem to affect them, at least, with the pale skin, and they would certainly have some other issues from the lack of sunlight. But I'm talking, if we're going to say more major things like developing larger eye sockets to let in more light, that would seem to be something that would develop over a longer period of time. Anyway, so our bodies were not designed for life underground, and yet there are moments when we have retreated underground. People throughout history have temporarily lived below the surface for various reasons. If there were no materials to build houses with, they dug subterranean homes, Hunt told Live Science. In places with extreme climates, people went beneath the earth in the summer to stay cool, and the winter to stay warm. Underground was also a safe place to hide from enemies. For example, ancient people built the famous underground cities of Cappadocia in what is now Turkey for protection against both weather and war. They were geographically in a very strategic place, Hunt said. They were constantly being attacked. The inhabitants retreated below ground during emergencies, but they didn't stay there for a long time, perhaps for weeks at a time. Seems like they would have had to have been there. Well, I guess Derinkuyu would be more like it. One of the largest underground cities in Cappadocia is Derinkuyu, which dates to around the 7th or 8th centuries and could have housed about 20,000 people. So 20,000 people. So imagine how long it would take. And actually to build that, and it says here, this would make the recently found Cappadocia city about a third larger than Derinkuyu. So the idea that the people in Cappadocia or Derinkuyu were only staying there for weeks at a time, I don't really buy that, because you're not going to build something this elaborate if you're only there for a couple weeks at a time. Imagine just how long it took just to build this, labyrinth of tunnels. And as for people living underground that we know actually factually are true, yes, there are the mole people in New York City, and there are other places where they are too. And these aren't, the chud, the cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers. This is a population of homeless people who do live under the streets of New York City. And it says, here by the parkway with the blasting trucks and the roaring cars near the filigree arches of the Riverside Drive viaduct, here with the gravel crunching under my feet as I run down the railroad into this hollow mouth. This is where they live, deep into the depths of the city, way underground, lying in the dirt. Sure, you know about them. Of course you know about them. They've always been there, resting low below the rowdy streets and the carving avenues, gulping the air from inside the earth, crawling through holes and cracks, living off the grid and off the books. Here in the tunnels. You've heard the rumors. Their eyes have adapted to the constant night that cloaks them from the topside world. Don't you know they're eating rats and human flesh? Don't you know they want us dead? And one day they will spill outside and burn us all alive, and they will reign over our flat screen joys and our organic delights. Obviously, it's being facetious. Of course you know about them, the lost ones, the hidden ones, the broken and the ill, the wandering, the gone, the mole people. John, I call looking up. John has been homeless for more than 15 years. Like many of the people interviewed for this article, he did not want to give his full name. He has been living here for a while now, in a small space between two support beams that can only be reached with a ladder. A plywood roof protects his boarded belongings from seeping water. The place is crammed full. There is an old mattress on the floor, and cookware, blankets, and electronics stacked on makeshift shelves. And again, I will leave a link in the description box for this article as well, but this is telling you about people who actually do live in the underground. So now that we did talk about the more realistic people who live underground, the ones that we actually know about, you may hear my granddaughter crying, she's teething. But anyway, let's go back to some of these more fanciful ones that, again, they're widespread. There are widespread stories of creatures like fairies and trolls and gnomes and elves and goblins in, cultures around the world. So they all seem to have, they seem to have a sense of truth to them. Now, are these, like I was postulating before, could these beings be things that live between the realms and are somehow able to get from the spiritual realm to our earthly realm? Are they able to do something that we simply have lost or that we do not know how to do? Possibly. Is it possible, though, that so many of these stories of these smaller, more diminutive creatures are simply people who lived underground, who have been living there for an extended period of time? Like the ant people. Underground mythical creatures have been a part of human folklore for centuries. These creatures are believed to dwell in subterranean caves and tunnels and are often associated with guarding treasures, causing mischief or danger to humans. The origins of these creatures can be traced back to ancient civilizations such as the Greeks, Romans, and Egyptians. For example, the Greeks believed in the existence of the chthonic deities, who were associated with the underworld. The Romans had their own version of the underworld, where they believed the souls of the dead went after death. In medieval Europe, the belief in underground creatures was widespread, with many stories and legends being passed down from generation to generation. These creatures were often depicted as mischievous or malevolent, and were believed to cause harm to humans who crossed their path. One of the most famous underground creatures is the goblin, which has its roots in Germanic folklore. Goblins were believed to be small, ugly creatures that lived underground and were often associated with mining and metalworking. They were also believed to be mischievous and would often play pranks on humans. Overall, the origins of underground mythical creatures are rooted in ancient beliefs and superstitions. While many of these creatures may seem fantastical and unbelievable, they continue to capture the imagination of people around the world and remain a popular topic in folklore and mythology. So let's just read about some of these, more fantastical ones, the ones that you always associate with fairy tales and myths. Dwarves. Dwarves are perhaps the most well-known underground mythical creatures. They are known for their short stature, again, consistent, long beards, and their expertise in mining and metalworking. And that also seems to fit right with the underground, theme. They are often depicted as grumpy and solitary creatures, but they are also known for their loyalty and bravery. Dwarves are said to live in underground cities where they hoard precious metals and gems. I'm thinking of Moria from Lord of the Rings. Goblins are another type of underground mythical creature. They are often depicted as small, ugly creatures with sharp teeth and pointy ears. They are known for their mischievous nature and their love of causing trouble. Goblins are said to live in underground caves and tunnels where they hoard treasure and cause mischief for unsuspecting travelers. Trolls are large, brutish creatures that are often depicted as living under bridges or in caves. They are known for their strength and their ability to regenerate lost limbs. Trolls are said to be fiercely territorial and will attack anyone who enters their territory. And they are also known for their love of treasure and will often hoard large amounts of gold and jewels. Elves are not typically associated with underground creatures, but some myths and legends depict them as living in underground cities. And this is true, and the same is true also with the Fae, like the Tuatha De Danann were said to have retreated underground in Ireland. These elves are often skilled in magic and are known for their beauty and grace. They are said to be protectors of the earth and its treasures, and they will defend their underground cities against any threat. So I will leave a link in the description box for this article as well, because it continues on talking about different legends and everything. But I thought it was just a fun way to conclude this video that we're going over today. But anyway, yeah, this is how my mind works. I start reading about one thing, and then I start thinking to myself, okay, but how could that be? How would that work? Is it possible that these beings, I'm not saying this is a real picture, I pulled it up off DuckDuckGo because it was interesting looking. But anyway, is it possible that at least some of these subterranean creatures that are spoken of in older legends and even newer, quote, urban legends, is it possible that they really did descend from human beings? I don't know. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work and would like to support my channel, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well, or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.